Hey pals, I wanted to do a quick demo to show you how to export your videos and get a bunch of frames that you can then utilize in your process books by bringing them into InDesign. So I thought I'd show you a couple of tricks to make this really smooth and rather straightforward. So here I have my video. It's just a video that I've been working on. It's a video that I need to get into my book that I'm making. And so I thought I'd use it as an example. I have the Adobe Media Encoder open here. So if I just drag this into the window, I can see that my option here is JPEG, which is great. And then by default, it's going to be set to this JPEG sequence match source. And so what you're going to want to do is come down here to export as sequence, and where it says frame rate, now by default, it's set to the 29.97, which is the default frame rate for video. But if I uncheck that, I can convert it to any frame rate I want. And because we're exporting it as stills, this frame rate equates to how many images you're going to end up with in the end. Now, you don't need 30 images per second for your process book. That would make, potentially thousands of images. Instead, you need more like 1 or 2 or 5. So you can play around with how many you need depending on how much movement and how much motion you have. But generally speaking, having like 1 frame per second of your video makes for like a really nice representation of it when you then make your image grid of these frames in InDesign. So I'm going to set it to 1. The other thing that I'm going to do, if you haven't started doing this yet in Media Encoder, if you're doing work in this quite a bit, you might want to start saving your preset settings for the things that you're doing a lot. So for example, I export video quite a bit at 1 frame per second in order to get collections of stills for all different reasons. Sometimes it's for project proposals, sometimes it's for process books, sharing things on the web and things like, all sorts of things. So with my settings the way that I want them, I can then go to the save icon here and I can save this as a preset. So I'm going to save this as image sequence and I'm going to list it as 1 frame per second. Like that. So then I know that it's ready. And then I can select it from my menu in the other screen when I'm done. So I hit OK. And now in the future, when I select JPEG for my export format, I will have this as an option. So you can see here's the one that I already had. Here's the one that I just made. And every time I select that, it automatically does this 1 frame per second and any other settings that you have. If you want to reduce the quality a little bit, another thing that's actually can be kind of useful here when you're exporting stills is underneath effects. If you scroll down, you can apply a time code overlay here. So if I'm to pull the playhead here, you can start to see what the time code of the frame or the image is when it saves out the still. And sometimes that's useful. I don't want that for this. Okay, so the other thing I need to do is I need to select my location. Now, you want to be careful to select somewhere where all these images are going to go. And so this is, right now having it set to 1 frame per second, I'm going to make somewhere around like 50 images for this. But you could end up making hundreds and you don't want those just like accidentally dumping on your desktop. I say that because I've accidentally done that and then you have to go through and clean it all up. So instead of ending up with like loads and loads of folders with just like a whole ton of images in it, I'm going to make sure to make a folder here that's named about the same thing as my file. And I'm going to select this as the place where I want things to export. So I hit save. So I've set my format to JPEG. I've set my frame rate for my sequence to 1 frame per second. I saved it as a preset. And then I've selected a folder for my output. So then I hit run. It'll go through. And then when I go back and look at my folder, I will see that I have a ton of images, right? So there's all my images. Now it says here that I have 50, and just planning ahead a little bit, I know that what I want to do is I want to have a grid that has an even number of columns across so that I can make sure that my images don't land in the gutter. And that'll make sense in a moment. But basically, play around with this and figure out what that is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get this list or this collection of 50 images down to 48 images so that I can end up making a grid that is 8 by 6. That way that 8, that the column, the number of columns it has is going to be an even number. So I'll end up with 4 on one page and 4 on the other. And this is easy because I don't want that black frame and even like this fade in. I can definitely get rid of an extra one of those. All right, so now I have 48. Now I'm going to flip over to InDesign, where I have my book project that I've already started in the Blurb book creator. And again, you can use Blurb, you could use Lulu, whatever you're using to produce your process book. So I don't need to walk through this, but if I did like create book, I did all my template things there. I can also turn off the templates and stuff so that I'm just looking at my InDesign page. Now I'm going to hit Command D in order to start the import. And I need to surf to my project, video edits, commute. And so here I'm going to hold down the shift key. I clicked on the first one, then I held down the shift key and I clicked on the last one. So I'm going to select all of these. And I'm going to say open. And it's 48 images, so it's going to take a second. Okay, so now that I have them, I'm going to click and drag in where I want my thing to be. But now look, when I use the right and left arrow, you can see that this starts subdividing my grid or my box into a grid. So if I do the right and left arrow, that makes more and less. So there I'm at my 8. And then if I go up, it starts to make the rows. So up arrow, down arrow, right arrow, left arrow. And so what I want is 8 by 6. So what am I at now? I'm 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can even see that like that's good. It's starting to even match the sort of proportions of a video. So then when I let up, it'll kind of go through and it'll pull in all my frames. And so now you see I have my video frames going across like this. You can see that like the gutter lands in between the spread there. Now, another handy thing is if you need to resize this, if I just grab this right corner with my cursor and just click and drag, you can see that it like resizes everything all super weird. Hit undo. However, if right after I click, if I hold down the space bar while I'm doing this, it does a live distribute. So I'm now holding down the space bar and I'm clicking. And then when I let up, you can see that it didn't scale my images and it didn't adjust the frames that are holding the images at all. The other thing that I can do with all these selected is I can go up here to my fitting settings and I can say fill frame proportionately. And that will snap all of them so that each one is filling the whole frame. Now it's kind of cutting off some of the images. So you have to decide, do you want it to, fill the frame or do you want it to fit the frame? But then when you hit save, when you export your PDF, you'll have your grid of images on a spread. And that is a easy way to get video into your process book. I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or reach out through any of the other channels that we use.